Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Access Granted. I am your host, Grant Chachere, and I'm the owner and the host of all Ruger Sports Media podcast. Of course, I'm also host the recruiting board, and also Friday Nights on the Bayou. Uh, the newest episode of the Friday Nights on the Bayou actually just is actually just been published on our YouTube channel, so make sure to check that out. We had on Spencer Verrett of the LSA network, and we recapped the Bayou Jamboree that happened up in Monroe, and then also we previewed week one of the high school football season. There's a lot of great matchups, so make sure you watch that. But today we're going to talk about what's been going on with LSU recently. Brian Kelly recently had his press conference where he kind of discussed what happened at the game. And one of the things that was talked about during about the game was how conservative they were in the second half. That was a critique I made in my podcast, and also an article I posted about the USC game and what happened in the game. And he actually did talk about in length about what happened in the second half. How they need to get Kyron Lacey the ball more. So here's Coach Kelly with what he said about what happened in the second half in terms of the offensive.
Coach, I understand the idea of, trying to lean on him a little bit late in the game, but did you feel like you took too much air out of the ball in the second half?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could look at, everything that we did when you don't win a football game and say, maybe we could have pushed the ball down the field. I think I made it clear that, Kyron Lacey is arguably our best offensive player, and he didn't get a touch. So, I mean, I think that's clearly something that, Joe and I talked about, and he understands that. He's a smart guy. I mean, we need to get our best players the ball when it means the most. And so, we've got to be better there in making sure that our players get the ball. And if that means pushing it down the field, we got to push it down the field too.
And one of the things that happened in his press conference was, a lot of people thought he threw Garrett Nussmeier under the bus. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but a good bit of people. And I don't think it really came out that way. He's mentioned that Miller Moss outplayed Garrett Nussmeier in the game. And really, I didn't really think that he was throwing shade at Nussmeier. And the reason why I say that is because Nussmeier had a great game, right? And so did Miller Moss. But Miller Moss needed to make the plays that he made. He threw the ball down the field, while Nussmeier threw either check down passes or short range passes. But I really don't think it's because of Garrett Nussmeier. I think it's because of the play calling. The play calling was a lot more conservative. They were trying to run the ball more in the second half, even though it really wasn't working outside of that long run that John Emery had. So I didn't really think of it. So here, by the way, here is Brian Kelly, because I think a lot of people think, oh, he's throwing his players to the bus. Here's Brian Kelly defending Kyron Lacey and Major Burns for their penalties. And really, I thought he did a good job of defending his players. And I think a lot of times what gets lost in the sauce is that Brian Kelly really cares about his players. So here's a clip of that.
Hey, Coach. After the game, you said essentially that Miller Moss, I guess, outplayed Garrett Nussmeier.
That's not what I said. I said that Garrett Nussmeier played pretty good, but Moss made some more plays at the end.
Yes. So why do you believe that Moss?
Because he won.
Took an extra step.
They won.
Okay.
The winner of the game versus the guy that didn't win. So my comments were not to disparage Garrett Nussmeier. I just gave you his numbers. He was 30 for 39 for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. My comments after the game were, how do you think Nussmeier played? I said he played pretty good, but the other kid played pretty good too, and they won the game. So this had nothing to do with Garrett Nussmeier not playing well. I think his numbers spoke for themselves. There's a couple of plays he left out there that he'd like back, and I'm sure there were a couple of plays that Moss left out there that he'd like back. He had, I think, 2 or 3 balls that were batted down that could have very easily been interceptions. I thought the kid played well, but our guy played very well either. So whatever my comments were, they were not intended in any way to disparage a guy that went 30 for 39 for 308 yards.
And I did want to ask about the running game. Has there been any thought about, maybe even creating a little bit more, I guess, diversity in the way you run the ball, maybe running under center or just creating a little bit more of a diverse scheme?
What would you like us to do? What, I'm just asking. We run counter, we run tackle pull. I think what you're really getting to is we have to be more efficient with our running game. And I don't know that it's a particular play, Koki, as much as where I sit and what I want is when it's third down and everybody knows you want to run it, let's be creative in running the football, but let's execute at a high level. And we didn't execute at the level we're capable of executing. Our O-line knows that, but we got to put our players in a good position. This is not just on our players. This is on coaching as well. But I don't know that it's a particular scheme as much as it is we've got to make sure that we're putting our guys in a good position. We can't be predictable. And I think that that's probably more than anything else what we got to make sure of. Because we've got every running play under the sun. Whether we're running pull, whether we're running inside zone, outside zone, counter, toss to the outside. We ran all of those plays. We just have to be better when our best is needed in those tough situations. And we weren't in some instances, and we've got to be better.
Hey, Coach Kelly.
I think it happens when you put in the work, and it means so much that you just, under no circumstances, can you let somebody take it away from you. And so you just can't let complacency come in at any time. And I'm not saying that we were complacent, but you just have to continue to build a mindset amongst your guys that the focus is on dominating that play. And we're still working on that every single day about dominating the play that's in front of us. And sometimes we get outside of that and we start thinking big picture and the game is over, or if we get one more stop. Forget about one more stop. Think about this play right now. And we're still building that with our group. And it's kind of like the Kyron Layson penalty. Kyron's working on his emotional control. If you were here, that young man, I love him because he's working on that every day. That wasn't like malice. That wasn't like it. It's just, he is such a high, strong young man that's all he works on. He's in the locker room saying, I need to maintain my emotional control. I need to maintain it. He is working so hard on that. That's why I was so angry. I was angry at the circumstances because he's working on it. Same thing with Major Burns. I mean, he was so apologetic and so sorry that he took his helmet off. These aren't guys that are just like, I don't care. That doesn't matter to me. These guys are working so hard at it. That's why I want so much for them. It just angers me that we're not getting that break where these kids are putting so much into it. I mean, we had the ball on the ground 5 times. I mean, like, really? It just was frustrating to me that these guys are working so hard, and we're going to get there, and we're going to break through, and you guys will see that.
Coach, right over.
So that's going to wrap up, his press conference and coverage of the press conference. I just wanted to mention those two. But there was some breaking news, some unfortunate news, really, concerning LSU football. And that was that John Emery suffered an ACL tear at practice on Wednesday. And it was breaking. It was breaking throughout the day Wednesday. It really sucks for a guy like John Emery. John Emery, of course, suffered an ACL tear last year. But even before that, I mean, he had to deal with a bunch of whether it's academic issues off the field that kind of halted from him playing the whole entire 2021 season. He comes back in 2022. He has to deal with some academic issues as well, and really had to climb up the depth chart to get more carries. And he had in my opinion, he did have a great 2022 campaign, even though he had limited carries. He made a lot of big time plays for LSU, including the game winning touchdown against Auburn, on the road at Jordan Hare that season, and then also the first touchdown against Alabama that put LSU in the lead 7-0 and really set the tone for the rest of the game. It's just really unfortunate for him. And a lot of people were cheering for him because, he entered the transfer portal. He entered the transfer portal in the spring, and, he decided, I'm going to come back to LSU. He was rehabbing really well so he can come back for the fall. He looked good in the fall, and he even looked great in the game against USC. But, that's just the way life works. And he tore his ACL again at practice, and that sucks for the young man. It really, really does. And I hope he bounces back. I think his playing days are done. I know he could possibly come back for a 7th year because, he got a COVID year. And then obviously you can get the injury hardship, but I don't know if he's going to get it. So I think his playing career is done. And it just sucks because he had a great game against USC, and I was really excited to see what he would do for the rest of the season, even if it was in a rotational role. So that's going to wrap up for LSU coverage for today. And then they're going to play against Nicholls on Saturday. I expect it to be a doozy. It's Nicholls. This is kind of a warm-up game because they start SEC play against South Carolina on the 14th, and then I believe they play UCLA on the 21st. So it's either the 21st or 28th. So you're going to start getting the heat of things, start to get the heat of the schedule. At least you have a warm-up game against Nicholls, and then you have South Carolina. He's on the road in South Carolina, and that could be tough, but it's an 11 a.m. game. South Carolina isn't the same South Carolina team as last year. They don't really have a quarterback like Spencer Rattler. So that kind of helps out LSU, especially on the road. It's an 11 a.m. game, but I think LSU should beat the Gamecocks pretty handily. Then they have UCLA. Then they have South Alabama on the 28th of September. And then you play against Ole Miss on October 12th. So at least that's a good thing. So I expect LSU to beat up with Nicholls in the first half pretty good. And then for the second half, try to play as many of your bench players as possible. And I think you're going to see Caden Durham the whole entire second half. I think they're trying to get reps in for Caden Durham. He's a true freshman running back out of Duncanville, Texas. And it's really important that he gets a lot of reps in this game because now he's RB3 behind Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson. So you're going to need to give him as much reps as possible. And then also you don't know what Trey Holly's status is like for the rest of the season. So it's very important that you get Caden Durham as much reps as possible because of the situation with the running back room right now. It's really important that you get him as much reps as possible. But moving on, let's talk about the Saints. The Saints play the Panthers this week. They kick off the season for the first game of the year. And a lot of Saints fans are pretty pessimistic. I saw a poll where the most pessimistic NFL fans this season, and the Saints are dead last. And that's what happens when you just have complacency in the franchise. For the past few seasons, you've had 3 straight seasons where you haven't made the playoffs. And especially that's considered after a run where from 2017 through 2020, you went to the playoffs every single year. And also they won up in the playoffs almost every single year too. I think the only year where they didn't win the playoff game was 2019. Yeah, it's 2019. Where they ended up losing against the Vikings in overtime. And that's also this is what happens when your team's just bad, right? You've had ineptitude on the offense. Your offensive line is one of the worst in that league. Derek Carr hasn't proven that he's worth $150 million or whatever, how much money he was paid. He was paid in, 8 figures. Well, 9 figures because 150 million or 120 million. I don't know. He got paid a lot. He got paid more than what we got out of a guy who's probably an above average quarterback. So yeah, there's that. I mean, I think the one bright spot for the Saints will be the defense, of course. But my concern is the safeties. I think Tyrann Mathieu will be fine. He's Tyrann Mathieu. He's a veteran. He knows. He's been a part of Super Bowl winning teams. But when your offense is kind of the issue, when the offense really, the Saints have always been known for being an offensive team, and the offense really hasn't been that great the past few seasons. And even if you bring in a guy like Clint Kubiak, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, this Saints offense isn't supposed to be very good. And look at the offensive line. The offensive line does not look good at all. Ryan Ramchik's career may be over. I think it's not what the Saints has done, but I think his career is over as well. This isn't really – I don't really have any high expectations for the Saints team. I don't. The Falcons got better. They added Kirk Cousins. And let's just hypothetically, Kirk Cousins gets hurt. I think they have a really good rookie quarterback in Michael Penix. I think he's going to be really good for the Falcons. I know a lot of people criticize that move for where they picked Michael Penix. I think it's a good pick. Maybe it's a little bit too early, but I think it was a good pick overall. The Buccaneers have gotten better. Baker Mayfield had a hell of a season last year. It was pretty much his career-defining season. That was really his last chance of being a quarterback in the NFL, and he played well. He made a Pro Bowl. He was all pro. So he had a great season. Then, obviously you had the Carolina Panthers, who are very, very bad. But I think this Saints team should beat the Panthers. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of holes with this Panthers team. Starting from up top, we have one of the worst owners in all of professional sports, and David Tepper. They just hired a new head coach, and Dave Canales. Dave Canales was the Buccaneers offensive coordinator last year. He was the quarterback's coach for the Seahawks, where he got a lot of credit for helping develop Geno Smith into becoming a pretty damn good quarterback after he had a German type of career for most of his career. He's a young, bright mind in the NFL offensive circles. The issue is that the Panthers are just so horrible. They got Bryce Young, but I'm not saying Bryce Young's a bad quarterback. He's just in a really bad situation. This Panthers team, they were the worst team in that. I think they were the worst team. They were the worst team in the NFL last year. They were 2-15. They were one of the worst teams in the NFL, and there's not really a lot of high expectations for this Panthers team coming into the season. Derek Brown's a really good player. Derek Brown made a Pro Bowl last year. He was probably the only bright spot for this Panthers team last season. However, the Saints should win this game. There's no excuse for the Saints to lose this game. I know the Saints have a lot of issues, but there's absolutely zero, and I repeat, 0.0000% chance that the Saints should lose this game. Period. I don't, what I'm saying? Like, I get the Saints have some issues, but the Panthers have a lot more. And if you lose this game, Dennis Allen might get, I think the writing's on the wall. He's probably going to get fired after the year. But if he loses against the Panthers this Sunday, that's only going to accelerate when and where he's going to get fired. So let's see what happens. And we'll have a recap of everything that happened this weekend with LSU, Tulane, and the Saints. And ironically, speaking of Tulane, we actually had on Maddy. I actually brought on Maddy Hudak to the podcast. This is a pre-recorded interview. We talked a lot about Tulane for the season and also their upcoming matchup with Kansas State. So stay tuned, and we're gonna put that on for you guys. And I really like Tulane's chances against Kansas State, and so does Maddy. So here's us talking about Tulane football. All right, guys, I'm here with Maddy Hudak. Maddy is a well-known figure among Tulane football. She's not only the silent reporter for Tulane football on the radio, she's also the publisher of Tulane's Sports Illustrated page. So, Maddy, welcome on the show. How's it been going?
It's been going well. Thanks for having me. It's been, as we were talking about before we hopped on, just good to have some real football to talk about.
Yeah, because I remember for a while it was just 7-7 and just a bunch of theories on what's going to happen in the football season. Now we actually get to see it play out. But Tulane is under new leadership in Joe Summerall. So what have you seen from the Tulane football program under new leadership?
I think the fact that you can see an identity forming on both sides of the ball in just 1 week of time on the football field really says a lot about his approach to this program. Feels like he's been here a lot longer than 8 months. And you just think of the situation he walked into where the sky was kind of falling a little bit for Tulane. There was no head coach in place. There was stuff going on with players going over to Houston. It was just a mess. And it's crazy to think that was the same offseason that we went into this year's training camp. The fact that, again, there was no starting quarterback until Thursday night's opener, and then ended up being the redshirt freshman who wasn't in the competition for the first 2 weeks. I think that just kind of says a lot about John Summerall's style, the fact that he's not afraid of kind of making that hard choice of making that type of call. And I think that the team has just really responded to his core values that he promotes of attitude, toughness, discipline, and love. So I think you can see the attitude in that quarterback room and just the love throughout the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. And my dad actually used to coach at Tulane for a while from 99 through 2006. He was actually he's an assistant under Chris Selfo. And I remember my dad told me that I think it was in either 2002, 2003, where they were thinking about scrapping the program altogether. 20 years later, they win the American Athletic Conference and win the Cotton Bowl. I know you went to Tulane, so you're there so you've been familiar with Tulane football for a while. What changes has the university made to make Tulane football to what it is today?
Well, it's crazy that this weekend's the 10th year anniversary of Yulman Stadium. It makes me feel really old. I was abroad the year that Yulman Stadium was built, so I just had it in that second year of it. And I think, quite honestly, people were a little hungover from the tailgating the first year because that was really all it was at first. But my previous 2 years at school, my freshman and sophomore year, we got bused to one game after Hurricane Isaac, a move-in weekend freshman year. I didn't voluntarily go back to the Superdome for a game after that. It was just very logistically hard to get down there, and there was really no sense of connection with the football team to the university at all. And I think that is totally flipped on its head. When you look at the student section and the turnout that we saw in Thursday night's season opener, it was raining up until kickoff. It's an unfamiliar opponent. It's not the same marquee name that a game like Kansas State brings. So to see that kind of roaring turnout outright, they actually brought the freshman class to our Thursday night scrimmage. And it was a really kind of good idea, just showing them how the stadium works, but giving them really a taste of this football team. These last couple of seasons, I just have been legitimately incredible since becoming the sideline reporter, but Tulane is just in a different ballpark as it really wasn't in the conversation when I was a student, and now they're firmly at the top of it.
I know earlier you mentioned that Darian Mensah became the starting quarterback last Thursday, and when it was still kind of up in the air who was going to be the quarterback. But what happened during fall camp that made the coaches think maybe we should put this guy in instead of Ty Thompson, Kai Horton, which are the two names we were hearing for a while? Darian Mensah just came out of nowhere.
I think it just goes to show how really difficult the position of quarterback is, and just sometimes it clicks with one guy. And that kind of was what happened with Darian Mensah. The first Saturday scrimmage, he had one series where he only threw 3 passes, but he went 3 for 3, threw for a touchdown and something like 100 yards. And it stuck out to all of us, but ultimately it was with third-team rep guys. But up until that point, Kai Horton and Ty Thompson, neither of them could really stack days. And it kind of felt like both of them at times were trying to win the quarterback competition more than just be a quarterback. And I think that's easier said than done. I think there's just a lot of pressure in that role, and perhaps not having any at all really helped Darian Mensah. But once they gave him the opportunity to take those first-team reps, he took the horns and ran away with it. It's nothing to do with the other two or any faults of them. It's just that Darian was the best out of them, and he kept stacking days and just really never looked back. And he emulates, I think, a lot of the qualities that you really miss in Michael Pratt with his leadership and just the way guys are really drawn to him. And it seems very natural for him to have all of that. have never played a live snap of college football before Thursday night. He hadn't even had a live pass rush in a practice setting until 2 weeks before, and wasn't taking reps with the first team until 2 weeks before the season opener. So to have that type of chemistry, to put up 52 points on the board, I know a lot of those touchdowns were by Ty Thompson and other guys on the field, but 205 yards, 10 of 12, that's as much as you can ask for from a redshirt freshman. And I really think he gives them an opportunity to win this game this Saturday.
All right, so Maddy, I know Tulane has a very big-time opponent, Kansas State, coming up. Kansas State, of course, has been a fixture in college football for the last 20 to 30 years. I mean, really, Kansas State is very similar to Tulane in the aspect of a program that really came from nothing to become something, and really, which is the flick of, one coach coming in, changing the whole culture, and making sure that program, after he leaves, is still a relevant program. And Kansas State's, Chris Kleeman's done a great job taking over for Bo Snyder. So what have you seen from Kansas State through the scouting reports? And you also have a hell of a quarterback in Avery Johnson, who they're really high on.
Yeah, and I don't think you really saw anything about what Avery Johnson's going to look like this Saturday with what we saw in the season opener. Quite frankly, for either team, I think playing an FCS opponent on both sides and having these kind of important road games ahead of them, Chris Kleeman, you refer to it as a chess match, and it really is. And one of those is not really showing your cards heading into one of these types of matchups, where I think it's a matchup where they match up well in a good or a bad way, depending on how you look at it on both sides of the ball. There's not necessarily an elite part of Kansas State that I would point to, but there's no real bad weakness, vulnerability, or bad spot for them either. I think they're very sound against the run and the pass, but they have such a unique coverage in the way that they employ three safeties. And it's something that gave Michael Pratt difficulty. He threw 2 interceptions against Kansas State and had to largely win that game on the ground. So it's going to really be a good test for Darian Mensah as a starting quarterback and what he can really do at that type of level.
Mm-hmm, no doubt. And, and you mentioned that Tulane might have to use the rushing attack going into this game because the difficulties of Kansas State defense. So who's going to step up for the run game? Because I know Mekhi Hughes has been a big-time player for them, not only in the last game, but also last season for them. He's a leading rusher. What do you expect to see from the rest of the guys, including Shawnee Clayton-Johnson?
That's who I was going to point to. I will say I think Mekhi Hughes probably not happy with his initial outing, but he didn't really have that large of a workload, and he tends to kind of wear defenses down as the games go on. And he had limited time in that season opener because they really were trying to have that running back by committee, and to have 8 ball carriers have 241 yards. It's a good output no matter how you slice it. But Shawnee Clayton-Johnson, especially with probably wanting to establish the run, especially against this type of coverage, but having those safeties all kind of in the middle of the field like that, getting guys out in space with the receiving abilities of Shawnee Clayton-Johnson, I think he just offers a wrinkle where he was often in the empty formation for third down for Tulane last year. And legitimately, you could put him at slot receiver and it would work. And he also, to me, on Thursday night, showed just a violence and burst, and his stiff arm was awesome. And to have, 4 carries for 48 yards, that to me showed that, his yards per carry, he's really going to be a productive guy this year. But you also can't discount what we saw out of Ty Thompson, and whether or not that stays in just the red zone or not. He's the fastest guy on the team, and that's the way to get him on the field. You saw his straight line and his lateral speed in both his rushing touchdowns last weekend. And I think that's going to be a key weapon against Kansas State.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and the defensive line, of course, is led by it's led by what's his name? Patrick Jenkins, I believe is his name. Yeah, Patrick Jenkins. Yep, just making sure I got his first name right. I know his last name, but I make sure I got his first name right. But he's a big time player out of John Eyre High School, originally, and he's been a key fixture in this defensive line. So we expect from this defensive line going up against this really good rushing attack from Kansas State, what that program's been known for.
It's going to be really critical for the trenches to shore up and, shut down both the run and this quarterback. But something Tulane struggled with in the last couple seasons is containing guys at quarterback that can run. You think of the UCF game and just John Rice Plumlee basically just ran track and ran past guys like Lance Robinson, who are so fast. It was just kind of astonishing to watch, but it's something they've struggled with in years past. So I think that's going to be a really important point of emphasis for that pass rush as they're trying to kind of come together and find their identity. But when you look at the teams that Tulane's played in the past, from Power 4, Power 5, whatever, you call it, in the games that they have made close contests, which I would say, quite frankly, outside of the Ole Miss loss in 2021, it's hard to really look at the Military Bowl outside of a vacuum to me. They have always competed because they're able to go pound for pound in the trenches. That Ole Miss game, they credibly were winning on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball for a majority of that game. And that's really incredible when you consider the fact that those weren't that long of offensive drives with a backup quarterback in there. And yet everyone really was holding it together. Tulane led through halftime. I think the trenches are really going to be where Tulane wins or loses this game.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's also the linebacker spot. We got to talk about the two led by Tyler Grubbs. I mean, they're going to play a key factor in this game as well.
Absolutely, especially again when Avery Johnson's his escapability, you just want to shut that down pretty much outright and help with that run defense, especially with the 3-man front. It just makes those linebackers really critical, and you've seen what they can do in coverage. But having kind of that spy look on Avery Johnson, just because there's really no game film to go off of, it's going to be definitely a test for that second level.
Mm-hmm. And what are your what are your worries about this game, and what are the things about Tulane that you expect to see them, do well? I guess.
I mean, if the first game was any indicator of special teams, it's not really a good one. So if that would be kind of my only point of concern, but that kind of spills over to what I don't think is really a concern for this team, but there was poor tackling on defense in the season opener. It's hard for me to point to a season opener for the years past where there haven't been those growing pains because there is no preseason and you just see it really everywhere. It's a little bit of a mess sometimes. But I think you're going to see that really get cleaned up. And you saw it really clean up as the game went on. And these sideline tablets, they're really fascinating to kind of see how the team really took advantage of that, particularly in the secondary. The pass rush, to me, I think it's going to be really important for them to show that, they're trying to find guys at that bandit role, whether or not someone steps up there or a guy like Aiden Huntington is able to make that not matter as much and contain Avery Johnson, make him have to throw. He's not a bad passer. He's certainly not Adrian Martinez, where once Tulane shut him down with his running ability, he really could not pass the ball. Avery Johnson can, but making him as one-dimensional as possible, Tulane's run defense has really been what's portaled them through the last couple of seasons. That's going to be super important for this game against Kansas State, where both want to control the run game.
Mm-hmm. And I know, you mentioned the tablets and everything. That kind of leads to my next question about technology. Now, the NCAA allowed a rule where one player on the field could use the green deck technology where they could communicate with the coaches. So how have they adjusted to that new rule, and how does that help them moving forward?
Being the sideline reporter, especially with these media timeouts, they probably only benefit me just because it gives me a lot of time to just observe and see what these guys are kind of taking advantage of during that downtime. And it just stuck out to me thinking back to meetings in years past and having the coaches have to shout what they're trying to say and frantically be drawing up ultimately X's and O's to depict a multitude of plays that just went down and trying to kind of remember exactly where you were. Whereas you can see, okay, my split was off. I thought I was closer to the hash, but actually I wasn't. And to see the players really kind of taking those and just sitting off by themselves. You saw it over on the offensive side too, where they had set up chairs kind of in a circle. I'd been eyeing them at the pregame, and they had a tripod where that iPad was shown there. But I just think the ability to see yourself, see it on film, and there's only, to me, so much you can draw out. You really have to be able to just watch things like receiver splits and this coverage for Darian Mensah, having the ability to look at that in real time, especially the fact that neither of these teams really showed their hands. It's almost going to be kind of a race of who can exploit real-time game film and take advantage of the technology, I think is going to be a key factor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, Tulane, the big-time matchup against Kansas State. But how much do you think this? If they win, how much do you think this will impact their playoff chances? And also, do you expect Tulane to make the playoff this year? Because there's the 12 spots reserved for a group of 5 teams. So do you expect Tulane to be that last team to get in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on this next 2-game stretch. I mean, listen, I know that ultimately the goal for this team is the conference championship, but that's kind of in its own vacuum. Whereas when we're talking about the college football playoffs, going undefeated in conference play isn't going to make that much of a difference. It's going to be, to me, whatever G5 team credibly shows that it's not going to be a repeat of the Liberty Oregon bowl game that we saw last year, where it was just such a mismatch in talent. Tulane was that team 2 seasons ago. They showed a very good resume as to why G5 schools should be in the conversation. But, Kansas State, they're a number 17 ranked team. And it's kind of fascinating to see the ESPN predictor almost even itself out after an overwhelming towards Kansas State after this opening game for Tulane. And I think that people's eyes are on them just because of 52-0 opener with a redshirt freshman quarterback and 50 something new guys on the team. There was only 4 starters that I recognized on the defense that took the field on Thursday. And those were all 3 levels of the field having to come together. I think that this win really shows that I think it put Tulane on the map in 2020-22. I think the huge difference this year is Tulane's on it, but to solidify themselves as that G5 team that's kind of leading the race going forward, this game really, to me, will make that difference.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Frank Silva just want to keep hearing 52-0 because I know it was his big return to Tulane after he actually was served as an assistant along with my dad. He was actually the assistant on the 1998 team, which is the undefeated team. So he's got a lot of history over here at Tulane. Then his son also played at Tulane as well. But I got one last question for you. So tomorrow or Thursday, I will be a silent report for Crystal City Sports in their high school game with De La Salle and Central. You have any advice you could possibly give me?
I take advantage of what the sideline really offers, and that's just the human experience. I look at how guys are interacting with each other after bad plays, who's kind of stepping up there. And I think that everyone can see when someone's body language is deflated and different. And I think just the ability to notice those things on the sideline is just as important as that perspective of being able to kind of see those things on the field. But for me, I think of, what can the broadcast crew not see from up there that I can really take advantage of? And that's stuff like how people use their hands at the line of scrimmage and just those little kind of factors. But then seeing how that really carries off the field onto the sideline, that's to me where I think teams are built. And I think back to the Kansas State win in 2022, halfway through the third quarter, I was like, Tulane's going to win this game. Just you can feel it in a way on the sidelines. And so I think trusting your gut and kind of going with the momentum and how things feel it's really the best part of being a sideline reporter.
Well, gotcha. Thank you so much. But also, before I let you go, can you also promote your podcast? Because I forgot to mention at the beginning, so you also have a podcast covering Tulane football. So kind of discuss that.
Yeah, on top of Tulane for Sports Illustrated, I have my Before the Whistle podcast it's on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. I just did a preview of this Kansas State matchup coming up this weekend. And that's always on, my Twitter where you can find everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all Maddy Hudak on Twitter. And also I'll leave a link for her podcast episode down in the description. Thanks, Maddy, for discussing Tulane football and also go Wave this Saturday.
Go Wave. Thank you for having me, Grant. It was great.
Thank you. So that was Maddy Hudak, who's the publisher for Tulane Sports Illustrated page. You can find all of her work online. She's also the sideline reporter for Tulane football. And then she also has the podcast Before the Whistle, where you can find on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcast. So it was great to talk with her to preview Tulane's season and also their upcoming big game against Kansas State. But before we wrap everything up, let's go over some top matchups of the college football weekend this weekend. So I know we already discussed Tulane and Kansas State, so we're not going to cover that. So let's talk about Texas and Michigan. Texas will have I think this will be a tough matchup for Texas. I think Texas should win this game. But Michigan I think is still strong defensively. I think they're going to give the Longhorns some issues on the defense. It's a matter of can they do enough offensively to win this game. Last weekend against Fresno State, and I know Fresno State is a solid Power 5 opponent. I mean, Fresno State's had some success in recent years, but Michigan did not look good offensively, especially throwing the ball down the field. Their quarterback, Davis Warren, was 15 for 25, but with 118 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And he also averaged 4.7 yards per throw or per reception. So that's not really ideal situation, especially going against the Texas offense that can push you vertically, right? And I still think they'll have issues against Michigan's defense, but offensively they're not going to be. But in terms of Michigan offensively, I mean that's going to be a tough matchup, and I think Texas is going to do enough defensively to frustrate Michigan's offense. The running game, I think, will be decent enough. I think that they're going to have a decent time running the ball, but they need to run the ball better than they did against Fresno State. The leader in rushing was Claude Mullins with 92 yards on 15 carries. But they're going to need to do a lot better offensively, running the ball. So that's going to be an issue for Michigan. I think Texas is going to win. I believe it's going to be like 24-17. I think it'll be very low scoring. I don't expect Texas to run away with this game, just because I think Michigan is still very good defensively, but I don't think Michigan offensively will do enough. The next game I want to talk about, I think this could be interesting too, is Arkansas and Oklahoma State. Arkansas had a big win over Arkansas Pine Bluff, 70-0. They beat the living breaks off of Arkansas Pine Bluff, and so it looks like the Bobby Petrino offense is doing wonders in Fayetteville. It's a matter of can they also do it against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, of course, brings back their quarterback Alan Bowman, who threw for 245 yards and 2 touchdowns, and their win last weekend. And also they bring back Ollie Gordon, who is a bona fide All-American running back for him. He led the country in rush, I believe, in rushing yards last year. If he wasn't the leader, he was definitely in the top 5. So that I think Oklahoma State should win that game, but I think it should be a high-scoring affair. I really do. I think that should be a fun one to watch. I think that's one of the more underrated matchups of the weekend. Then you also have Iowa State and Iowa. If you like defenses, this should be the game for you. Iowa, of course, is one of the better defenses in the country. They've always have been since Kirk Ferentz has taken over. Iowa State, they're led by Matt Campbell. I expect them to do things good, do great things defensively against Iowa's offense, who's still in some capacity suspect. I know they had a coordinator change, Iowa, but I still think Iowa's offense is still a little suspect. However, this game's always been very close. It's always been the last few years has been a low scoring affair. So I think that's the game you should watch out for. I think Iowa's going to win, like something along the lines of like 17-14. And then this is a really Iowa also lost their game last year against 20-13. So I think this will be a revenge game for Iowa this season after losing 20-13 against your in-state rival. So that's Iowa and Iowa State. Another game I think we should also look at is Tennessee North Carolina State. NC State has a solid quarterback of Grayson McCall. He transferred in from Coastal Carolina, if that rings a bell. He's a very solid quarterback. He's a very veteran quarterback. And it'd be very interesting to see how he does against this very talented Tennessee team. With Tennessee has a hell of a running back in Dylan Sampson, who, by the way, is a Baton Rouge native. Went to Dutchtown High School in Geismar, Louisiana. So Baton Rouge area native right there. And they also Tennessee has also led a quarterback by Nico Iamaleava. He was the number 1 quarterback in his class last season. And last week he threw for 314 yards with 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, had a completion percentage of 78.6% and they went 69-3 win over Chattanooga. However, Chattanooga is not NC State. NC State's a solid program. They have a solid coach and Dave Doran. I think this game would be close. And also this game would be played in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's right in NC State's backyard. But I do think Tennessee will pull it out in a very close one. I think it'll be along the lines of 35-28. I think it'll be close. 2 well-coached teams, 2 great programs, a lot of talent. And I think Tennessee, I think they have a bounce back year after having sort of a down year. I know they finished 9-4 last year. And that was a solid year compared to a lot of seasons they've had in the past. Tennessee was down from 2008 to about 2021. But, under sorry. But under Josh Heupel, it seems like Tennessee's has come back out of the dark, and I think they're a solid program again. I think they can compete for an SEC title. Although I don't think it's very likely, just because given the amount of teams in the SEC, they're also very talented as well. But they do have the talent to be a dark horse team to win the SEC. But yeah, that's going to wrap up today's podcast. Uh, it's big football weekend, and once again, it's not only is it the second week of the college football season, the first week of the NFL. You got a big weekend for Tulane upcoming, welcoming the number 18 team, Kansas State. But also it's the first week of the high school football season in Louisiana. So very big week all around for the sport of football all across the state of Louisiana. And I'm very excited for it. But anyway, this is Grant Chachere, your host of the Access Granted podcast. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And also make sure to follow Ruger Sports Media wherever you like to use your social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. But anyway, have a good weekend, y'all. Peace. Oh.